Welcome everyone. I will welcome. We're happy to see you. Today's session is, what does college ready math look like? So Amber, my name is, I'll let Amber take it away for here.
Well, we'll tell you who we are in a minute. You don't need to know who we are, but you are here to learn about math. So our first activity today is going to be to look at some math. So what I want you to do is I want you to don't put anything in the chat. Don't put anything in the chat. I'm gonna say it one more time. Don't put anything in the chat. I want you to just use your noggin. We're warming up our brain, getting ourselves ready. It's our first thing we're doing here. Your brain might already be tired after listening to the plethora of professional development that is on your way this year. But I want you to look at this question. This question comes from an official AccuPlacer practice test. So I'm going to give you a second and I want you to think about which of the following expressions is 5 times as much as the sum of R and S. Think about it. See if you can figure it out. I'm going to be quiet for 30 seconds so you can think. When you have an idea of what you think it is, I want you to type the letter, but do not hit enter. So just put the letter in. We are going to do a really cool activity called a waterfall, which means we are all going to hit enter at the same time, and we're going to see our answers come up together. So I want you to hit enter in 3, 2, 1. Hit enter with your answer. Oh, it's so exciting. So for those of you who are watching the recording, the chat is going crazy right now. Rebecca, what are you seeing?
I'm going to show all the D's. All the D's are coming through. So I'm actually very surprised. That was I'm peeking and I think it was 100% D. We all have the exact same answer. So what did you notice about this problem? So go ahead and chat in the chat box, or if we have a really great group. This is a nice size group, but we can still unmute if you want to talk for a second. But what did you notice about this problem?
So I see somebody's noting something about like order of operations. That's a really great thing to notice. There's parentheses, and how do I figure out where parentheses go? There's vocabulary involved. I love this. There's a question. Could there have been more than one correct answer?
Great question. On a multiple choice test, I always tell our students, if you think there's 2 correct, read the directions carefully, because if it doesn't say there's 2, then there can't be. Or more than one, I should say.
Right. And in the directions, it said which of the following expressions. So if you're just reading that and you don't understand which, usually means, sometimes in this context means 1. There's some people that notice that how they wrote their work down looks a little bit different than how the answer key wrote it. So this is
reading. I'm just going to add one more. Reading comprehension is crucial skill for this type of problem. I just wanted to sneak that one last comment in. Very good.
So this question is included because we're going to talk more in just a minute about who we are, but this is a really common question for the early tests in the semesters of the math classes I teach at a local college. And so this is a kind of question that represents assumed knowledge that our students are coming in with. So we just wanted to warm you up with an example of what some college-ready math might look like.
All right, so now that we have you warmed up, we'll do a quick introduction. My name is Rebecca Strom, and I am an ABE math instructor at Lincoln Community Center in Mankato. I'm also a math instructor on South Central Community College's campus, in that I co-instruct their lowest DevEd, their Math 75, 85, and I've been in their Math 95 different semesters. So supporting that ABE support that we know our students need after the instructor does the lecture and does the problems, then I'm able to come in and create a more supportive, like, fill in the gap holes.
And my name is Amber Delliger. I work for I work for Metro North at Anoka Ramsey Community College and Anoka Technical College. My ABE support looks very different than Rebecca's does, which is one of the exciting opportunities we have in our state to have lots of different models. It's an amazing opportunity, but it also adds for adventure, right? I work alongside and I co-teach with certain faculty, which means that I will have specific instruction time. So I'm not usually doing things like reworking a lesson, but I'm adding things in or I'm providing additional support in other ways. And then I also work with offering specific student-centered hours. So think about like what an instructor's office hours might look like. I run something called a Get Stuff Done Club, which is where we work on time management and study skills, but then also getting stuff done. So we are here today.
I'm in love with that title, the Get Stuff Done Club. That's
I
awesome.
mean, it doesn't have to be fancy, but we're here to get some stuff done. So Rebecca, what are our goals for today?
So our goals today are to examine the gap between the high school equivalency test, whatever model that is, and the college ready math skills. We want to start this conversation of discussing the changes that have been coming and are coming in college placement and developmental math. We're going to review these skills identified by college faculty and college students on what they determined would be helpful for college readiness. And I just want to really reiterate that we want to start this conversation. Amber and I have been on these college campuses for a handful of years. We just came back from MCTM, Minmatic. We're hearing so many, like what's happening, the changes that are coming. And we wanted to bring that to the ABE classroom, have this conversation and see what we can do in our classrooms, in our program that might better support our students. So here's the start of this question. Your students just completed their HSE. Now what? So oftentimes we celebrate their passing and then we have different guidelines or tracks or like, so what pathway are you on next? But the big question is, if they are on the college pathway, what happens between completing that GED, that high set, that adult diploma and college? How do we address that gap? So we decided to look into this and consider first what is required for those passing scores. So when we look at these passing scores, the GED, the minimum score to pass is a 145. What's commonly accepted for college readiness is 165. And both Amber and I have been on different math pathway meetings with Minnesota State College, the statewide system, and they are starting, because of that presence, to consider GED scores in the multiple measure. So we're really excited to be on the radar of how they're incorporating their multiple measures for incoming students. For the adult diploma, right now, there are no official indicators. When you get your diploma, there is no scale of if that means how close you are to college readiness. And for the high set, the minimum passing score is an 8, but what is deemed college ready right now, we are being told, is a 15. So what do you notice about this slide? Yeah, that is a big gap. So what are some things that you're immediately thinking about in your program when you think about slides like that, or these numbers? How many of you are working with the high set, how many GED, any adult diploma, just so I can see in the chat box the different variety that we're working with? A lot of GEDs. I know high set is brand new, but so I'm just curious if anyone has started it.
Mostly GED, but I do see some ADP people, so that's great.
That is awesome.
So we are hoping that as we're starting this conversation, we can have a really good idea of what is happening with our students, because our goal has been in ABE and continues to be that the GED or your high school equivalency, whatever it might be, since Minnesota has several options for you. We didn't include credit recovery, but there's lots of options, right, to get your high school equivalency. But there's a big gap between what that high school equivalency means and being ready for college placement level work. So college level work is identified in a number of ways. We mostly refer to what we've learned in Min State. So Min State is kind of like the giant conglomeration of a number of different 2-year and 4-year institutions that are connected. And so that's both Rebecca and I both work for state connected schools. And so placement is something that's really important for us to consider. So as your student finishes their GED, maybe they get the 145 and they're like, peace out, it's time for me to go to college. I'm going to college now. We have to start having really honest conversations. So just because you get your high school diploma does not mean you have the skill set required in every area to have college level coursework. And I really want to be careful in this conversation. Can you go back one slide real quick? I'm going to come back to
sure.
this again. I really want to be careful in this conversation that we are not saying that high schoolers are coming out of high school ready for college placement either. It is a problem. So college placement, how the college decides what classes you go to is evolving. So historically, we've used things like AccuPlacer and ACT scores, which now is changing and evolving. There's a lot of changes coming down for whether or not those are good assessments. The AccuPlacer we're finding has not a great indicator for your likelihood of success, especially in math classes. And then a lot of schools are getting rid of ACT requirements as an equity and access issue. So there are lots of different ways that they are using to figure out what classes you should go to now that you have your high school equivalency or your high school diploma. What classes should you start in? And so they are doing something called a multiple measures placement, which means that you can have some things like a college ready GED test. You could have a high AccuPlacer test. You could have high ACT test, and then you can just get placed in, not a big deal. But for a lot of our students who don't have like a 3.4 GPA and a high ACT score, there's other things that they use to figure out where they should start. And so they use a mixture of a lot of different things to figure out where is best for you to go. This process is really evolving. It was underway pre-pandemic, and then literally the year they were launching multiple measures, the pandemic happened, and so chaos ensued, as you would expect. So how they're placing students into college classes, especially in the min-state system, is evolving because of the changes and things that they learned during the pandemic. This being said, it is really important that you specifically speak to the colleges near you. I know what the colleges in my area use for placement, and it is not necessarily exactly the same one-to-one as it is for the schools Rebecca's working with. So you want to make sure you know what criteria your school is using to figure out where they go.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. And just adding in, the other multiple measure piece is self-placement as well. They're allowing students to place themselves sometimes where they feel they're ready, which can either go one way or the other. I had a student so we've been getting referrals from the college lately, which has been great. But I have a student with this multiple measures was very stressed out because based on her GPA, they were putting her in college algebra. But she said that GPA was 5 years ago. I haven't seen math forever. And so that was stressing her out because based on multiple measures, she was being placed in college readiness when she absolutely did not feel college ready. So being able to serve our students and help them get confidence to keep going as well.
So there are a lot of changes happening in developmental education. So if your placement indicates that you are not ready to take on college level coursework yet, there is a system that is called developmental education, which is essentially the pre-college level skills, which is how ABE got involved in this program. There is a complete overlap for developmental education because that's pre-college level work, and we are pre-college level work. And so that's where this partnership often comes from. However, there's a lot of changes coming down, and everything that we know about the changes are also evolving. So it is a very dynamic experience right now. Currently, we are working under the understanding that all developmental education classes, so all pre-college level classes, need to be no longer offered by min-state institutions by spring 2026. which would mean like no developmental reading or math classes. This, however, we learned just last week at the MCTM and Minmatic Math Conference up in Duluth. They're changing this language a little bit, so it may be a softer launch than what we were thinking, but that is still pretty fluid. So it's important to keep in touch with your local institutions to see where they are in the process. So what this means is that we are, this Min State is looking at removing math prerequisites for a number of different classes, as taking more math classes takes up more time, takes up more financial aid, and it makes you, if you do not pass a Dev Ed math class, your likelihood of completing your long-term college program goes down quite a bit. So the idea is that if we take away the early developmental ed math classes and get you straight into a college level math class, you should be more likely to succeed. What they're looking at doing to address this is something called a co-requisite, which means that you are not placed into a college level class, but maybe you're close-ish and you need extra support. So ABE is being brought into the conversation to provide extra support for students who are not quite college ready, but are being placed into college level courses. And we're trying to work with Min State right now to figure out what kind of appropriate things that might be. So that might be providing what they're calling just-in-time instruction. So maybe a little bit of support, a little bit of remediation, we're going to be talking about this kind of thing in statistics next week. So I'm going to kind of prime the pump with a little bit of a refresher the week before, as well as including things like ACEs and TIF skills and North Star skills, because college readiness is significantly more than just the content that you know. And one of the other things that they're doing is that a lot of campuses are now really wanting to push ABE to come back to their campus and offer ABE style courses, not just GED prep, but that's GAP, that GAP instruction. So for students who are not ready to place into a co-rec class or a college level class, that they would be taking ABE classes on site. All of these things, I just really want to put that caveat that these are evolving, they are dynamic, and this is what we know as of Friday, April 28th at 9:49 a.m.
Absolutely. And I just saw a comment in the chat box. Good news. It is good news that they are considering bringing ABE on campus. And what Amber's describing is also a college by college situation. So the college I work with, they're doing the co-requisite, so the college level class, and then a 2-credit class for the just-in-time teaching, but they want that to be all college instructor. So they're bringing in ABE in a different capacity, and every college is going to do that different. Some are talking about bringing in ABE to help with the co-recs. Some are talking about keeping that college professor, but then having that ABE presence for people on campus. We're thrilled that ABE is part of the conversation, but we really don't know what that looks like yet. And of course, we want to help our students not pay for 8 credits of anything that they're not prepared for. So our goal is how can we bridge that gap so when they leave ABE and they are paying for that college credit class, that they have the skills they need to be successful. So in that idea of looking for what does that look like, we decided to ask the experts. So we sent out a Google form and we reached out to college professors from 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, private, public, some in Minnesota and some from out of state. And I tried to keep it really simple. What are some academic barriers you are seeing to your students' success in college? So I'm just going to let you read through this. So I created a word cloud just to kind of see the words that were coming through frequently. So take a second to look at this, and does anything surprise you? Do you notice anything? Let's just talk for just a minute about this, but I'm going to give you a few seconds to read. So go ahead and populate the chat box with things that you notice or are surprised by. So I know wait time in a conference's virtual session is really painful, but I'm trying hard.
So I'm starting to see some great things in chat. So we're seeing things. So we were looking at this is an academic barriers. So be really careful that like things that you think you might want to be seeing might show up later. But in this one right here, things that are really surprising to people we're seeing in the chat are things that understanding. Understanding is a really big one. But then people are making connections of what does that mean with studies, skills, motivation, habits? How are those connected? So people are interested in things that they're not seeing. So that's really something to say. I really want to highlight this thing that just came in. Is it really surprising when we are struggling with students who are just barely able to pass the GED and that's their goal? And then if they're transitioning, that might be a challenge, and that's a real challenge we see.
I agreed. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of comments on exactly what was mentioned. Understanding being, those memory work skills that aren't able to carry them forward because they lost them right after the test. So the second question we asked, so the first one was focusing on academic barriers. The second one was focused on what do you consider necessary content that students have as they start college for college readiness skills. So once again, do a quick notice and wonder, and then throw your comments in the chat box. I know it's a kind of a confusing fine line between academic barriers and necessary content, but there is a lot of overlap. So this one's it's targeting much more specific math terminology, words, and content here.
So for those of you who were like, I'm really surprised I didn't see fractions, notice fractions here is kind of large and in charge, but not the biggest one.
I noticed when I created this word cloud, a lot of people's response were basic algebra skills, basic arithmetic, basic. So when the first word cloud I made, the word basic was huge. So I had to take the word basic out because it was taking over from what the basic content was. So, and also the word basic is up for interpretation. What does that even mean? So a lot of these words are kind of like how you interpret it. But I was happy to see numeracy coming up, that is a skill that people are understanding, that we need to have an understanding of numbers, how they work together.
Yes. And I also noticed that somebody put a great comment in. I don't see conceptual understanding. So one of the things that we noticed as we were surveying college instructors and these different college faculties is that they're expecting a high level of mastery. They do not want to be teaching the conceptual understanding of a fraction, a decimal, a ratio, a percent, or integer work, positive and negative numbers. It is expected that that is a highly mastered recallable skill with high levels of automaticity. So they are expecting students to come in on day one without any necessary work in refreshing these skills. If you are starting a college level algebra course, the first assignment requires a very high level of mastered background knowledge. It is not expected that they are reviewing or refreshing anything that you see in this bubble. So this bubble is things that they do not expect to in a college level math class do refreshing on.
And I just want to tag on, that's absolutely true. But also from a college professor, they're not always huge on conceptual understanding anyway. They don't always build in the why, the how, the way that adult education does. We've come back to our field really does build in why do we need that denominator to match instead of just get it to match. Here's the trick, let's move forward. So we know that conceptual understanding piece is important. In college, it really is about fluency. Oftentimes in my classrooms that I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed different, but the expectation is fluency is not so much understanding the why. And I want to
I
also,
sorry.
no, it's just, go ahead.
So I think one of the challenges is that the college instructors would love to build more conceptual understanding of the content in which that they want to teach. So this idea of like, I want to be building conceptual understanding for college level algebra, but I'm still trying to work through you getting basic fluency with integers. And so that is a challenge that we're seeing. And so, and we're definitely not endorsing this as this is something as a good model. I do see a great thing from a person in the chat saying that like they're happy to develop that in developmental classes, a lot more of that conceptual understanding of these basic numeracy skills in this bubble if it's a dev ed class. But once we switch over to a college level class, it is a very different experience. And so if our students are still really struggling with I don't understand an expression, which is the biggest one here, we have 16 weeks. And so, and so if we have to back up, how do we navigate that? And so that's one of the challenges as an ABE person. How do I provide just-in-time instruction when you're still building conceptual understanding of what an expression is while we are working on trig functions?
And I just wanted to tag, as before we move to the next slide, what you're saying. And there was a comment in the chat box that says the information is just as important for us as teachers to take into heart. How much are we encouraging this just passing? And I know that that we're all a lot of programs, that is the focus. Let's get people testing. Let's get the GED ready. You're testing at a 146. Let's try the test. But maybe we need to think about, is that the best model to get them testing so early that they're not really ready, but they feel ready to leave the program? So how we can also consider that question. All right, the third question we asked was, so academic barriers, necessary content, what would be incredibly helpful content? So these are some things that we saw. So take a minute and do one more notice and wonder on this page. Yeah, I see the question for the parent approach. I'm not sure exactly what was meant by that comment. So
Those are parent functions.
Parent functions, that's right. Thank you.
So a parent function would be like, if we're starting with a linear equation and building off of that, how do we adjust that? How do we modify that, especially with linear and quadratic and things like absolute value or things like that, where we would see those similar, like those are our foundation parent functions.
Somehow the Wordle separated the word parent from function, and it kind of lost meaning on me for just a second. Thank you for reminding me.
So I see a lot of things. These are things when we asked, what are things that are helpful? So one of the things that's interesting is that like a language issue, we are seeing a lot of colleges adjusting how they're offering ESL services as well. So for our speakers of multiple languages or speakers of languages that are not necessarily English, they are not getting the language support. But additionally, in that same way that our instructors were responding, students are having a really hard time navigating words, and not just word problems, but directions or descriptions, words on page, and undeciphering meaning and using that is a challenge.
I also appreciated that people were drawing attention to the fact that there's growth mindset is important, and self-efficacy is important, and these other things were really relevant. Time management skills. I think I saw note-taking skills. Like, these are things that they're recognizing are important for our students to have.
The last thing I wanted to highlight here is that it is not just algebra focused. One of my biggest concerns, I am an algebraist at heart. It is my favorite thing on the whole planet. But there was a huge movement away of college algebra is a gatekeeper for a lot of students for having success. And I think a lot of programs, teachers, and students measure their math success on their ability to do algebra. I really want to highlight in here, you're going to see things about statistics, you're going to see different kinds of computation, there's different kinds of things in here, financial literacy. Math is so much more than algebra, and that was highlighted really heavily at the math conference last weekend, the statewide math conference we attended last weekend. And so thinking about how do we provide, if especially for our students who are not STEM pathways. So STEM pathway would be that like science, technology, engineering, math, nursing students. For those students who aren't those students, but still need a solid math background to meet transfer pathway requirements, or other prereqs for their degree, there's more than just algebra out there. So are we teaching things like statistics? Are we teaching data literacy? Are we teaching financial literacy? And how are we doing those?
I totally agree. Keeping that broad. I also have the other flip side of that algebra piece, in that how many times we've heard people say, my students can't do algebra, and not really understanding that algebra is algebraic thinking, and that we don't want to hold our students back by presuming what they can or cannot do. So that's the other piece. All these other maths, everything Amber mentioned, are so important. And I think algebra has that anxiety connection to it. So we want to be careful that we don't make assumptions that it's too hard for our students, but still give them the pathway that they can follow to whatever their skills are.
Yes, it's about access. Our goal is to make sure that students have access to the math that they want to be able to do, which is our foundations of numeracy, right? So this slide here, while not a word cloud, I tried to do snippets off of our survey, and there were too many good things to pull off of, so I just had to summarize. So one of the things that I am working on at a personal level is I'm working on all these projects, making really big decisions for students. And my mission as I'm moving forward, and I really want to encourage you to do the same, is it can't be about us without us. And so I have decided that I'm going to bring students into the conversation about this as often as possible. So I created a survey for students, and I said, hey, what advice would you give to a student who was trying to get into a college level class? Like, what do you think they should know? And right now is a really important time to do it because we're entering finals. Our finals are in a week, and it is we're at the end of 16 really strenuous weeks, and thinking about like, what do you wish you had as you came into this experience? And what would you tell somebody as they're starting on their new adventure? And so so these are probably not surprising. And so these are things that our students say that like, I wish I had mastered. This isn't, I wish I was learning. This isn't like, I think that it would be fun to explain, like, I wish I would have had this solid before I started. So things like basic arithmetic came up. Every single student noticed. Specifically, every single student that answered the survey said, I really wish I would have spent the time to really understand my multiplication facts up through 11. 11 was the number. I don't know why not 12, but 11 was the number that they really wish they had all of their multiplication facts memorized too. They are, especially for students who are going to get ready for college algebra, it's really hard to do a lot of that transition from elementary algebra to intermediate algebra to college algebra without those math facts. We do factoring all the time, and we use factoring for lots of things. And if you don't have your multiplication facts ready, it is almost impossible to get fluent or have automaticity in those skills. So everybody said, please make your students memorize multiplication facts. That's their feedback. The other things that they said in our next box, which is not surprising, was that fractions and decimals freaked them out. And it's not that the computing of them were hard, but they said that they felt so much stress whenever they saw them that it made it hard for them to get over the hump to be able to approach the problem. So if they see a fraction and they panic, they know that they can't even get into it to try. So they said, I really wish I had known that I could handle them before I get in there. And the idea of like being able to compare them, being able to calculate them, being able to convert them, just having a sense of comfortability with fractions and decimals, because they show up in lots of problems. And if you can't even get to the math because you're so panicked about the symbols, especially of just seeing a fraction or decimal, that is a challenge. So the other thing is they wish they had they really say that they want everybody to come in with a good sense of order of operations. Now, I work with a college faculty member where we don't teach order of operations, and we do it very, very differently. But understanding things like inverse operations, or how you do and undo things, the idea of the relationship between an exponent and a root, or like addition and subtraction, those kind of things become really helpful. And then those were like basic math things, but I also wanted to highlight some of their not math things. So the other thing they wish that they had had more experience with was communication. So none of the students surveyed really said that they felt like they knew how to ask their instructor questions, how to really email an instructor, how to ask their friends for help. How do you start a study group, or how do you ask somebody like, hey, how do you know this? And so they said that we build that in our class, but if it takes 11 weeks to build that communication, that really impacts the first 2/3 of their semester. The next one, I love that they all said this answer, especially because I am tracking their homework completion and I know that they're not doing it. So this is I wish I was better at, because I know it would help me do better. The commitment to homework. So in college math classes, I'm not making a blanket statement at all, but many college math classes believe that the real practice digging in and learning happens outside the classroom, and then inside the classroom is a different kind of experience. And so our students are coming from a situation in which they are coming from an environment maybe in high school where they didn't have homework, or in an ABE program where there's not an expectation that they're doing anything outside of the classroom, and that when they only need to think about math in this self-contained world. I am working with classes that are flipped. I am working with classes that have high levels of online homework expectations. My class is a 5-credit class that expects my students, like the instructor expects the students to do 10 to 15 hours of homework outside of class. And if you are coming from a situation in which you never had to think about math outside of the time you're with that instructor, that is a really huge thing. So our students are recognizing, I'm not doing my homework, so I'm not being able to ask good questions, so I'm not able to get the help that I need. And then I'm just praying that some magic happens on the test day. And then the last thing that they said is they wish that they felt more comfortable and safe using tutoring, because once they start, they feel like they've uncovered this magical thing that we beg them to go to tutoring. I require them as an assignment to meet with a tutor, to come to my office hours to do these things. And so that's a mindset thing. Asking for help isn't a bad thing. And then dedicating and protecting time. So if you make an appointment with a tutor, you're more likely to go and get help, and means you're more likely to maybe do some homework. And so students said, if I knew that tutoring was this good and I just scheduled an appointment once a week to meet with a tutor, I probably would do great. So these are just things that when we asked our students, what do you think students should be able to do when they start a college class? This is where they think you should start. And I am in a dev ed class, and it is week 15 of 16, and we are still working on building, developing, and reinforcing these skills.
And as we're moving forward, everything Amber said is something we're seeing on the ABE campuses, and of course on the college campuses. The idea of my favorite is when a student doesn't come to class because they didn't do yesterday's homework, so I'm not going to come to class today. So you realize now you're just spiraling out of control. They don't, not understanding that feeling. And I do understand that feeling of when our students leave ABE, which ABE is a very flexible situation. We create an environment for students to learn in whatever capacity they have. If they're working, we have distance learning. If they're doing this, we try to really accommodate our students' learning. And I love that about adult education. What is hard is the college campus can't do that. So how do we fully prepare our students for that transition? several years ago, I bumped into an ABE student in the cafeteria at the campus, and she was in tears because she wasn't handling the speed of college coming out of ABE. So one of the things we did, their theme for this was flowers because it's spring and we're really hoping for those beautiful days. And we were looking at how we can put all of these pieces together. So looking at this is that college ready piece. And how can we find how to build all of this in the classroom? How do we prepare our students best for this?
So we want to encourage you to take a moment and look at this flower. How would we help our students bloom? How would we help ourselves create a situation to bloom? So just we want you just to take a minute and look at, these are how we summarized what we learned. But I'm really curious is there anything that is standing out to you? Anything that you think we missed? Take a peek.
So one of the things we also want to do is give you the opportunity to have this conversation before the end of the session. So as you're looking at this, and I don't want to rush, but I know we want to create that opportunity. We're going to put you in breakout rooms so that you guys can start this conversation. Start the conversation about how this can look in my program. Are there things that I think I can implement differently? Are there different mindsets that I can have in my instruction? Is getting students in and testing the GED the second that they reach a 142 the best idea if they tell me they want to go to college? Should we keep them a little bit longer to better prepare them and not keep them as in hold them back, but say, hey, this is your first milestone. Let's get a little bit further before your next milestone. So how we can have that conversation. So Andy dropped a Padlet, and that's where we're going to have you put the information. So if you're able to either use the link or the QR code, grab a Padlet, and there you're going to see some questions. I can share my screen really quickly. And these are the questions we want you to have, but also a place to leave this information so you can come back, revisit, continue to add. This will be a living document for resources you might have. So in your breakout rooms, we're looking for what options does your program have for students who have a diploma and are getting ready for college? How do you develop those soft tip skills? How can we keep our students in the program once they finish? Because we want them truly ready. We don't want them to use all of their financial aid on dev ed classes. What questions you might still have about preparing students for college level math, and what additional resources or training do you feel like you would need as an instructor in ABE to help better prepare your students for that next level? So are there any questions about what you'll be talking about in your breakout room? So I think based on time, we're going to give everyone we'll do like 6 minutes. And I know it's not very much time, so do your quick introductions and jump right in to that meaty conversation that you can have.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. So we would like to do just a little bit of a share out from your groups. We realized 6 minutes was certainly not enough time to have enough time to really get into some of the conversation. But what are some of the things that you talked about in your groups? Did anything surprise you? Anything you learned from what other instructors are doing? If you want to unmute yourself because you're representing what you talked about in the group, that would be fine.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Jody Greniger. How are you today?
Good. How are you? Good to hear your voice.
I don't see anyone unmuting. So we kind of chatted about the GED test, and I've been out of the loop for some time doing transitions at Lake Superior College. And with the multiple measures and kind of the happy chaos that we've been doing with placement, I actually pulled out the practice GED test and did it with my group yesterday and took it myself. And it's been years. And it just reminded me of the rigor of a GED math test and what the folks are doing in the dev ed world up here in Duluth. Our GED folks would definitely be successful in our two 0950s and 0955 courses.
So you said that you connected it to the rigor. So did you have any insight, like how that would, the connections between the two? Or it was just, sorry, I was checking
The
list.
students in that's okay. The students in my current courses were shocked at the formula sheet and the amount and the skill level of the test. They were absolutely shocked that that's what the GED test practice has looked like.
Were they shocked because they thought it was too hard or too easy? I'm curious.
Hard.
So here's the thing
Hard.
I just want to point out about the GED, and
harder
I
than
think
I
a
thought.
lot of us get confused on it. The GED test is 3 tests in one. So you have the 145, which is high school equivalency. The 165 score is college readiness score. And the 185 and higher means college credit score, which means there's stuff on there that is college level. So I think that could be why it may, depending on which problems you see. So I always remind our students that there is a lot on there that you don't need to know, because they're also testing for college level as well. It can be really intimidating to see.
I also want to highlight something that I heard her say, which was wonderful. One of the things that we need to remember is that not every college campus is really offering a strong ABE class. So we have at Anoka Ramsey an ABE class where students can go to build their skills up. But in a lot of the placement conversations that are having, they're taking the floor out. So if a student doesn't have to take an ABE class to build up their skills, or doesn't have that just kind of comes in and jumps in, we're going to have some students who don't have experience with that. The other thing I see in the chat, another thing I heard her say that I wanted to highlight, is that it's a great reminder that if you are going to be working with students who plan to go to college, you should take the AccuPlacer. You should take the GED. You should take the HiSET and get an experience of what those things are. A lot of colleges, I know that my college has all of our final exam review packets available for free online. Take the highest level dev ed class in my school, that is Math 0250, which is our intermediate advanced algebra course, and see what that final exam review packet looks like. That's the skills that students are expected to know as they are entering their first college class. So there are some great things there as well. Some other things I'm seeing here is that they want to offer more in chat. They're saying they would love to offer more, but they don't feel like they have resources that are adequate to do that. I know that as staffing challenges happen, that is becoming a bigger and bigger concern when we have less access to teachers or class sizes are going down. When you have your GED prep and your basic skills prep or your college prep students in the same room, that can provide an extra challenge. If your college is not recognizing GED in their multiple measures, I would encourage you to reach out to me, because I was the one who was able to get the GED scores added to our multiple measures. They just needed documentation that there is things there that are important. So it is really important that it's happening, and there are enough schools that are doing it now that there are precedents. I can't promise that they will do it, but it's something important to include. So Rebecca, we wanted to end with a cool down. Now, we aren't going to do this problem because we got a lot of stuff to do. But this is an example of a problem that my students in my classes right now, as they're getting ready to take their final, not multiple choice, but this is an example of a question my students might see. So think to yourself, how do you feel when you look at this? How would your students feel when they looked at it? And then if you want to know the answer to the question, message Andy directly and he will tell you if you're right or not. All right.
All right, we have about 1 minute left. So I just wanted to add on, just quickly, keep throwing messages in the chat box. Do not hesitate to keep filling that Padlet. You have The link, if you let someone else open it in your group and you didn't open it, make sure you click on that Padlet link before you go so that you can continue just to fill that. Think about things you're doing, think about information you want, and especially think about that last one about what training could you use as an instructor or for your program to learn more about it. That is something that the Minnesota numeracy instructor team, that advisory team, is going to consider as they move forward with more professional development. We also have a few, go ahead.
Sorry, we wanted to include resources for you. The Atlas Numeracy Resource Library is always amazing. We're going to talk more in just a second about the Adult Numeracy Network. Google is a great resource. We just don't always know what to Google. So things like math readiness assessments or AccuPlacer practice tests. And don't forget, OER Commons has a lot of really great resources. Maybe you need to take an intermediate algebra class on your own or look at a college algebra class. And those resources are free. And then I did notice in the chat, somebody said, don't forget about Khan Academy. And we also included that link.
And one of the links we put in for Khan Academy, they have college algebra and higher there. So this could also be just a personal reference to sharpen up some skills. We know Khan Academy is not perfect, but they do have the opportunity to practice problems and immediately find out if your answers are correct, as well as get hints for how to solve them. Another amazing resource, as Amber mentioned, was the Adult Numeracy Network. And if you're not familiar with this, please reach out to me and ask. It is an amazing national organization of all adult education math instructors. You don't even, if you're not teaching math right now, but you're trying to embed it in the classroom and you're not considered a math teacher to yourself, you are one. These have great classroom routines. They've got research. They've got everything we need as math instructors to keep growing the field. And one of those areas is professional practitioner research. A lot of the research out there is for K-12. So if you would like to do some research in your classroom or find research that has been done exclusively in the adult education classroom, reach out to me or check out the website, and there's some research out there in addition to a million other things. Sorry, I can't summarize it in a minute, but I was trying to.
So then the other resource we wanted to have you know is that MinMatic is the Minnesota Mathematical Organization of two-year colleges. They would love to have us involved and engaged. There is a $17 a year membership. You don't need, if you don't have, there's no reason to pay for voting rights unless that's something you're interested in. They offer a lot of great PD and offer a lot of great advocacy work in the field, and we should really be at the table there as well. These slides will be in our folder, and I know a lot of us have to get to our next session. We really want to encourage you to keep connected with us. We want to continue this conversation. Rebecca and I are not the only ones doing this work, but sometimes we feel really isolated, like we are, even though we know it's not true. So please, let's continue this conversation. And I know you heard a lot about it at the opening session, but there are other PD offerings coming up, including Summer Institute with Andy Albee and friends, and Math Institute. So those are things we want to make sure that you are connected with. You're not alone, and let's make sure we're doing these things together. Lindsay has put in the flyer, copy of the flyer for your next session in the chat. You also have a link to our slides. I put the AccuPlacer practice test for quantitative reasoning and arithmetic in that folder as well, so you are able to just download those. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. 2 extra minutes of your time.
Thank you so very much. It's been great. Keep this conversation going. We're here to learn as well, and I look forward to reading your comments in the Padlet. Thank you guys. Have a great day.